Imperialism in Muslim regions. Napoleon brought the Ottoman Empire decline into the public's eye. By doing that, the Europeans started to interact with Muslim regions. European nations ate away slowly at the Muslim regions, and as time went on, the Europeans went for everything. Muslim lands spread from Western Africa to Southeast Asia. In the 1500s, there were three major empires: the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. The empires were spread across in different areas of Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. By the 1700s, all three empires were in decline. The reasons they were declining varied, but the major reasons were central governments losing control over its military, guilds, and nobles, and corruption. Corruption was widespread, but it started with Muslim scholars that allied with the state to gain power in the empire. In the 17 and 1800s, reform movements thrived in Muslim regions. All the reform movements called for strict rules for behavior and religious piety. Usman Dan Fodio was a reformer that called for Muslim rule in northern Africa. In Sudan, Muhammad Ahmad announced that he was the Mahdi, or the savior of the faith. He and his followers heavily resisted European expansion in Muslim regions. The Wahhabi reform movement in Arabia rejected theology classes and laws that were created under the Ottoman Empire. The Wahhabi movement was put down, but the teachings and ideas are still very influential today in Saudi Arabia. Another reason the empires were in decline was the powerful threat of European expansion. The European nations made treaties through force or diplomacy with these Muslim regions. In these treaties, Europeans gained trade and special rights. Europeans kept these treaties by intervening in local affairs. The empire that was most affected by European expansion was the Ottoman Empire. At its height, the empire spread across North Africa, southeastern Europe, and the Middle East. During the 1800s, the empire faced many challenges. Provincial rulers had increased their power. Economic problems and corruption also caused the decay of the empire. The idea of nationalism spread throughout the empire and caused internal revolts. Many regions of people broke away from the empire, including the Greeks, the Serbs, the Bulgarians, the Egyptians, and the Romanians. The Ottoman Empire put down many revolts, but during this time in Arabia, Lebanon, and Armenia. European colonies wanted to benefit from the decline of the Ottoman Empire, and did. Many countries took a lot from the Ottomans, but they wanted more. Some of these countries were France, Russia, and Britain. Russia gained control of the regions including Bosporus and Dardanelles, which contained straits that could take them to the Mediterranean Sea. Britain tried to suppress the Russian success to regain control of the Mediterranean Sea. Since the late 1700s, the Ottoman rulers saw the need to reform, so they looked to Europe. The Ottoman rulers reorganized the government and the tax collection system. The rulers embraced the European way of life in their military and school systems. Men were sent away to the West to study, and they returned with new ideas of life and government. These improvements also created new problems. Some of these problems were population explosions, competition for the most fertile land to farm. It also created tension. The rulers rejected reform and tried to regain control and rule over the empire like the rulers had before. In 1890, a group of liberals formed the Young Turks movement. They preached that reform was the only way to save the empire. In 1908, the Young Turks seized control from the Sultan. Before they could reform, the empire was put into the First World War in 1914. Traditionally, the empire allowed the minorities to practice what they wanted and live the way they wanted to. By 1890, nationalism was creating tension with minorities in the government. Because of the tensions between Muslim and Catholics, the Ottoman government killed over 1.5 million Catholics in the region of Armenia. This was called the Armenian Genocide. In the early 1800s, Egypt was the Ottoman province and it was seeking reforms. Muhammad Ali was a soldier appointed by the Ottoman Empire and was the governor of Egypt. Egypt's successes during this time are attributed to him. He used Napoleon's invasion and civil war to gain control of Egypt for himself. Muhammad Ali reformed the policies of Egypt, introduced a new system of tax collection, landholding systems, and large irrigation projects. He encouraged the production of goods that made Egypt a world trader. He encouraged local industry and cotton production. He brought European military tactics, trained the modern army, and conquered neighboring lands. Some of the lands that he conquered were Arabia, Syria, and Sudan. He brought Egypt to be a Middle Eastern power, but died in 1849 before Egypt could become one. Muhammad Ali's successor was not trained, skilled, or able to become the leader of Egypt. In 1858, a French entrepreneur, Ferdinand de Lesplace, organized a team to build the Suez Canal. European countries gave the Ottoman Empire loans to finish the canal with a high interest rate. With high interest rates, Egypt went into debt because the ruler of Egypt could not pay the money back. To pay off the debt, he sold his shares of the canal to the countries he owed money to. The British bought all of the shares and gained control of the canal. Britain made Egypt a protectorate in 1882 because the nationalists revolted over their foreign influence. The Ottomans were still in power, but only by name and not by rule. Egypt followed the rules dictated by the British government and not the Ottoman government. Egypt modernized under the rule of the British. Egypt flourished, but the nationalists were still unhappy. They caused constant revolts. Around the same time, Persia faced very similar things the Ottoman Empire faced in the 1800s. The Shahs who ruled Persia were exercising absolutism. They did reform, they introduced railroads, telegrams, and experimented with the liberal constitutions. The reform did not save them from invasion. Russia wanted to expand into Central Asia, but Britain wanted to protect its self-interest in India. Many countries set up the spheres of influence in Persia. Countries during this time discovered oil in the region, which made the region more popular. Both Britain and Russia wanted control of the Persian oil field. They both persuaded the Persian government to give them special rights to the field. To protect the interests in the field, both countries sent in armies to maintain their rights. The Persian nationalists were outraged. Some wanted to adopt Western ways, and religious leaders opposed the reforms in the government. All of these things led to the destruction of all three empires: the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals.